Alright guys, welcome to Cisco Nate. So this video is going to show you how to download and install ISE 3.0 on VMware 6.7. Now that just happens to be because 3.0 is the newest version and I'm running ESXi 6.7. There may be some small or nuanced differences between older versions, but just so we're clear, ISE 3.0, VMware 6.7. Now I'm using vCenter and ESXi, and that will be important for reasons later in the video. You'll see that I'm using what's called a content library. I highly recommend you use that as well if you're going to be installing more than one virtual ISE 3.0 server. So next, we'll get into the requirements. See you there. Alright guys, so the requirements for this video are pretty simple. This is installing ISE 3.0 on ESXi 6.7 and vCenter 6.7. So the first thing, as always, that you need when you're trying to access software is you need a CCO ID. If you don't know what that is or don't have one, stop now and go talk to your PSS or TSA to find out what you need and how to get it. Or you can go online and look up how to get one yourself. The other thing is you need that CCO ID to be associated with the proper contracts. Those contracts convey what are called entitlements, and the entitlements are what allow you to download or see software based on what has been purchased through your contracts, i.e. the contracts associated with your CCO ID. So if you go to the software.cisco.com and you don't see any particular software that you're looking for, make sure you check that your CCO ID is properly associated with the contracts and that they have the proper entitlements. The best way to do that is talk again to your PSS or TSA. All right, the next thing you need is access to a computer and a web browser. You also need ISE 3.0 image, either ready to download from software.cisco.com or already pre-downloaded, and you need that available on some sort of server, whether it's your local computer or an FTP server. I personally use my local computer because ESX provides a web GUI interface for uploading the image to do the install. So that's it. We'll see you in a minute. Alright guys, so as usual, I'm going to start from the ground up and show you everything that I do. Now my lab is in a remote lab, so I'm going to RDP into my jump box before I go through any of the steps here. So I'm now in my jump box. We're going to open a browser, and I actually need to navigate to software.cisco.com. Now if you guys find that when you load this page, you're already logged in, that's because of a cookie your browser stored. Sometimes when you kick software download, it will just infinitely spin the ribbon here. And that's because your session is actually expired, even though the cookie still has you quote unquote authorized. So if you just see a wheel spinning here and a wheel spinning here indefinitely, close the browser, open up software.cisco.com, log out, and then log back in. Now, if you've already downloaded some software, it'll be here, and this is a faster way to click through the breadcrumbs and get to the software. For most of you, you want to come down here to select a product and type in Identity Services Engine and hit enter. Now that's going to bring up two options, and these are just nested options. Identity Services Engine then lists software as a selection, so we'll just skip that step and go directly to software. Now that we're at the software screen, you see 2.7.0 is a gold star. That is a current recommended baseline image. I am going to show you how to do it with 3.0.0 because it's new and because the install method is exactly the same for both of these. Now, this is an eval for me, and I am downloading the eval image. You would download the appropriately sized image for you, and you would know that either based on your own architecture discussions and sizing and scaling, or because you talked to a Cisco PSS and or TSA and had this done for you. Either way, I'm going to start this download. Now, if you don't see these links here, that's because there's a problem with the contracts and or entitlements that are linked to your CCO ID. Stop now, go talk to your PSS and or TSA and tell them there's a contract or entitlement issue because you cannot download the software. All right, these are rather large files. This is 15 gigs. I'm going to click download, and after you've clicked accept license agreement and it starts downloading, take a break, go get a coffee, answer some emails, work on something else, come back when it's done. If you have a decent connection, it'll be like 19-20 minutes. If you're slow, you might be an hour. It's all up to your connection speed. We'll see you in a minute. I'll pan back once it's done. Okay, so my image has finished downloading now. I'm going to navigate to my downloads and make sure I see it here, and there it is. So ISE 3.0. 300 gig image, 3615, 3655. Now this image has the SNS 3615, 3655 because that is the relatively equivalent hardware appliance for this virtual appliance. All right, that being said, let's navigate over to my vCenter and we're going to get started. Now, as I said before, I'm going to use what's called a content library. And a content library is essentially a locally hosted image store. And the reason that's beneficial is it's locally hosted on the ESXi server itself, which means the installs go much faster. If you're deploying 4, 5, 6 nodes because you're deploying a full ICE deployment, then this is the way to go. So I have already pre-placed my ISE image here. If you have not done this before and you want to do it now, we'll start from the ground up. From the content library, you click plus. You create a name of the data store or the content library. You choose which server it's on. Now I only have one, so that's what pops up here. Click next. Tell it it's a local content library. Now, if you have a very large or mature ESX infrastructure, you may have a lot of other options you have to deal with here, but this, I'm just showing you how to get started as an engineer with a single node server. All right, then you choose which data store you're going to use. Now, I tend to use the disk platter data store that I have, which is about the same size as my SSD. SSD is higher performance, obviously, but these images only need to be spun up and transferred when you're building a new server. I'd rather save the SSD disk space for operational servers rather than just data sitting on disk. So I choose this disk store, I hit next, and then you hit finish, and it would create the content library. That's what this images is here. After that, I would go into images, hit actions, import item, local file, and then upload the image file that I'm trying to do. As I already said, I already did that. So now we're going to skip ahead. We're going to navigate to hosts and clusters, click on the node that I want to install the server on, and I am going to right-click and say New Virtual Machine. Now this is an OVA, i.e. OVF template, but the problem is when you click Deploy OVF Template in 6.7, it's talking about you transferring an image over the wire right now. When you choose New Virtual Machine, that gives you the option to deploy from the template you just put in your content library. So I'm going to hit Next here, and we're going to continue with ISE 3.0.0. Hit Next, give it a name. We're going to call it ISE B. Going to hit, or actually I'm going to call it Bravo, so it's clear and distinct later. Put it on that node, next. It's validating the image and any configuration details you've put into it. This will take just a minute, but it should come back just fine. Make sure you have enough disk space, enough CPU, and enough RAM. There we go. We're going to go ahead and do thick provision. That means all of the bits are written already. I'm going to do a small just so it has extra CPU and memory to spin up real quick. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do eval. No, I'm going to do small. There we go. All right, hit next. We're going to choose thick provision, so all the bits are already written. That means higher performance in the end. We're going to put it on my management and hit finish. Now, this is going to take a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and pan away, and we'll come back once that's done and continue configuration. This should take about 5-10 minutes to complete on a decently fast ESX node. Alright guys, so the image is finally finished building, and it took about 5-10 minutes. So I'm going ahead and click on it. Now, if your button up here is gray, all you have to do is hit this refresh button here, and it just because the ISE VM was installed and the GUI didn't refresh to tell you what options are available. Alright, now that it's green, go ahead and click power on. And while it's powering on, we'll go ahead and just click on the console image to get the console up and running. Now, it is going to go through a lot of initial configuration once you go through the setup steps, and that will take a significant amount of time. So this is the first time you're firing it up and you want to configure it, just type setup. And we're going to enter a host name. Now, this is not the FQDN, fully qualified domain name. It is just the host name. So if your ISE FQDN is ise-b.cisconate.local, all it is asking for here is the ISE-B portion. IP address, this will be something you have pre-selected somewhere. I'm going to say 63, just to guarantee it's unique. Now these are just IP addresses that you've selected from your IP schema. If you don't have that, you need to get one. Obviously, you need to have the gateway. You absolutely do not need IPv6. DNS domain is good to have for automatic name resolution when you type in just the host name instead of the FQDN. Primary name server. You need to know your DNS server. That's the name server. Put that there. Don't need a secondary. NTP, you should absolutely have an NTP server running and providing time to sync everything. ISE is very intimately linked to accurate time across the infrastructure. And time zone UTC works. Yes, I always enable the SSH service. You do not have to, but I would recommend it. Admin as default username. All right, now the password that you have to put in here cannot be super simple. It has to meet some complicated criteria. So just try till you get one that works, but it needs to be a strong password. Okay, so I successfully populated all of the setup information, and it is now going to start configuring the device, everything from the NICs to running database initialization, and this does take significant time. There's about 100 scripts it has to run through, and it will pause on some of them for more time than others. So we see the clock is at 12 right now on the dot. This will probably take about 25 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pan away, and then we'll come back once it is done. Alright guys, so it's been exactly 26 minutes now, and ISE went ahead and finished the initial configuration, restarted, and it's at the command prompt. Now, the reason I'm going to start this now is because I want you to see that even though you get the command prompt, on the first reboot, the services are not necessarily started up right away. So I'm going to go ahead and log in with the credentials that we put in originally, and I'll show you how to check to see when you can actually log in. So I'm at the pound prompt, I'm logged in. If I do show application status ISE, it's going to run a little check and verify that all of the services are up. And the web GUI that you need to run into specifically is attached to the application server. And as you can see, it's in the not running state along with the majority of the other services. That's because none of these have actually been kick-started yet. So it's going to be a little bit longer. The server officially has installed and started up after 25 minutes, as I said before, but it'll be a little bit longer before you can get into the web GUI. So I'll go ahead and pan away now, and then we'll come back when it's ready to go. Alright guys, welcome back. It's 12:36, so 12:37 now. As you can see here, the application server is now running, which means the process that serves up the web GUI for ISE is up and running. The IP address I gave ISEB was 192.168.194.63. So at this point, I'll go ahead and verify that address. Yes, ISE Bravo is that address. We're going to go ahead and grab the browser that we used earlier to download software, navigate to that address, and we should have a successful ISE web GUI for a login. There we go. So we're at the login prompt. We'll go to admin, type in the password that we entered earlier at CLI during initial configuration. And that user is the first web GUI user. And there we go. You have a successful ISE 3.0 installation on ESXi 6.7. It's in evaluation mode, and we can now configure it, number 1, for licensing, number 2, integrate to Active Directory, and number 3, set up TACACS for your first network access device control. All right, have a good one, guys. Talk to you later.